This is Radio Brockley.
Hello and welcome to Brockley News Extra, the programme where you get another chance to catch up on our recent interviews, including updates from in and around the hospital, local charities and special guests. I'm Alan Joyce, and coming up on today's programme, we hear the extended version of our latest interview with the hospital's chairman, Professor Anthony Goldstone CBE. He'll be giving us updates on the new hospital, plus an insight into some of the decisions going on here at the RNOH. Don't forget, Radio Brockley is with you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So stay tuned to London's longest-running hospital radio station and your number one recuperation station, the multi-award-winning Radio Brockley. So we were very grateful to the RNOH chairman, Anthony Goldstone, for taking time out of his very busy schedule to speak to us here at Radio Brockley. He came in recently to give us updates on where the RNOH finds itself now and where it hopes to be in the future. Our reporter and trustee Keith Reeve asked the questions.
I'm very pleased to be joined by Professor Anthony Goldstone, who has been the RNOH chairman since February 2011 and has overseen much progress during that time here at the RNOH. His medical career started in 1969 and he was awarded a CBE in 2008 for services to healthcare. Professor Goldstone CBE, welcome to Radio Brockley.
Good morning and thank you for inviting me again. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's wonderful to have you, and thank you very much for sparing your time, which I know is precious with so much going on here at the RNOH, more than ever probably, I would think. Your chairmanship's been extended to 2018. What do you think have been your best achievements in the time at the RNOH, and what would you like to achieve in your next year?
Well, firstly, next week on the 1st of February, I will have been here 6 years. Chairmen don't automatically finish at that sort of time. In fact, the powers that be seem to change it on a regular basis. I think, as everyone can literally see, we're actually moving into a period where things are starting to happen. So I'm pleased to be extended for a further year. In fact, I would have been happy to be extended a little bit longer than that, because I think some of the projects that are we hope are underway will take rather longer.
Is there any way that it could be extended longer?
Well, I think there's no point at pushing at that door at the moment. In the middle of the next 12 months, if things change or move on, so it looks as though it'd be useful to have that continuity, then NHS improvement, as they are now amusingly called, might extend it further. And of course, the emphasis that what's happened during my period is hopefully a little bit due to me, but let's make it perfectly clear that any progress we're making is due to the efforts of the staff and the executive and non-executive directors on the board. In particular, without the chief executive, Rob Hurd, and his intelligence, resilience and tenacity, I don't think we'd be moving forward at all. So in essence, what we're doing now is maybe up to 50% more actual activity than when I came 6 years ago. That's with not too many more staff and really not too much more money. So not only that, but I think after this enormous battle which is constantly discussed around here, we can see, the patients and the staff can see, that the new NHS build is going up, and that is making progress on time, and that will replace approximately half of the current beds, including in particular the paediatric or the children's beds, which will be on a more useful and fit for purpose structure than ever before. So interestingly, what you have to do now is give a lot of patients a single room.
Yeah.
So any new facility in the health service is looking in a specialist service to make about 50% single rooms.
Mm-hmm.
That's good and it's bad. It's good because it gives the patient more dignity, more privacy. It's not so good because you've got to make more space when 50% have got single rooms. It costs more money. You need more nurses to keep looking at the individual patients. Instead of looking straight down the ward, they've got to go in. It sounds a bit funny, but actually the vigilance of the supervision of patients means the staffing costs are higher. So it's a good thing, but it's not necessarily that easy. So we are hoping that this first building is part of a sequence of at least 4 projects on the site. We are hopeful to complete a deal with the University College London, UCL, to sign off a second build of the new research facility very, very soon. That's been dragging out rather longer than we would have hoped. We are hopeful that we would bring a proper private hospital facility onto the site. For years, our skilled surgeons have been using better facilities in terms of the bricks and mortar outside at Spire Bushy, Clementine Churchill and elsewhere. We think it's important that the profits to the system from those activities come back into the NHS. So that's the third project. And the fourth project, which hopefully we'll get going soon, that I'm sure we'll talk about later in this interview, is Princess Eugenie House, which amongst many things that it accommodates is what we call a step-down facility. So you can have a 7-day stay for surgery. You can have the first 2 days in an acute facility and the critical care, and then you need much less nursing, and you can go into a different facility where you're undergoing rehabilitation, but the staffing needs are less intense. And I think that's, when I say it's the way for the future, it's really the way of the past as well. Convalescent homes and nursing homes we dispense with in our infinite wisdom. We've got to call them something else or else it'd be too embarrassing. So we call them a step-down facility. But we're going back to where we were 30 or 40 years ago, and quite right too.
And we've got an ageing population that's increasing, which needs more of that kind of facility, as we all know. So with Princess Eugenie House, I think when we spoke to Rob probably end of 2013, maybe 14, there seemed to be some kind of funding shortfall for Princess Eugenie House. Is that now resolved, or is there still an issue there?
Well, I think it's resolving, and hopefully it will be resolved. I think the issue is that we wanted to do something very nice and attractive, and the cost per square foot was really more than we could get to in terms of the charitable and other donations. So we are kind of scaling down the level of glamour of it to a much more utilitarian concept. It'll have the same facilities. That function has 3 or 4 different things. The first one is this step down out of the acute beds. The second one is to, when we bring patients for teaching or rehab courses or special groups of patients like improving spasticity care or what have you, we put these people up now in the hotels along the A41 and obviously spend quite a considerable amount of money. If we bring back, repatriate those funds and put those kind of patients in our step-down facility, then that will help financially. Thirdly, we got a grant from the LIBOR. There was a lot of government fines for some of the odd activity of the banks on the currency markets, and much of that money has been distributed to the charity sector, and we, through Tim Briggs and others, have got hold of some of that. And the fourth thing is we'll pick up some of the rehab work on army veterans, which was being done elsewhere, like places like Hadley Court. So there's a big need in several different categories for Princess Eugenie House, and some people think that that kind of multi-dimensional facility could be, in the awful modern term, rolled out across all sorts of facilities up and down the country. So it might be the kind of first exemplar of the new wave of step-down facilities adjacent to acute hospitals. So the argument is not only the clinical and the financial one. The argument is, can we start something here again, an RNOH kind of first, that could be used in many other places. So we've been worried about those costings for the last year or 18 months, and it hadn't really moved on. But I think there's a political impetus to it now that people are talking step down in general terms to be one of the stages of getting people out of the acute beds so they can be used more efficiently.
Yeah, because there's a lot of publicity this winter about that, isn't there? Bed blocking, so-called.
Yes.
And not having the right facilities to move people into.
Yes. So obviously some of the so-called bed blocking relates to how much care you can get people back in their own home and with their own families. Obviously, in later life, a serious hospital admission sometimes means you can't go back to the same kind of accommodation and the same kind of circumstances that you had before. So it is a complete life change. And of course, it's not only the pressure on the social services and care homes and nursing homes. A lot of patients themselves and families don't realise that even with successful surgery in later life, there's such a significant life change that they're going to have to then live in different circumstances. The Princess Eugenie House will address some of that. That's the two things: the immediate element of completing the stay so you can free the ward for more surgery, but the patient still needs to stay, and then the second element of enhancing the rehabilitation by, in the context of the expertise available on this site in the big therapies department that you can't get in many other places. So it will address those issues to some extent, yes.
Is some of the next phasing of the redevelopment going to be funded by land sales? And if so, when will that land go up for sale?
Well, the first phase is already, if you like, being funded by a land sale that hasn't taken place yet in the western what we call the Western Development Zone. The matter of that land sale is an issue. There are two things. One is the optimum timing of when the land sale actually takes place, which will probably be towards the second half of 2018 in terms of the market value.
Yeah.
And the second is the replacement of various things on that site now, and where do they go to? So, to be blunt, you can't kick people out too quickly unless you've got the right place for them to go to. So that land sale is very important. First of all, lots of people who don't understand the difficulties constantly say to us, well, you've got 120 acres here, you know, why can't you just sell a lot of it and build a hospital? It's not that easy. The land has to be commercially viable for housing at a particular level. There's got to be access. We have more aggravation from the local population about the increased traffic because of the new housing than we do about anxiety about the new hospital building. So, and of course we have, thanks to our team and advisors, you know, we've gone successfully through Harrow Council for this land sale. This is greenbelt land. It's very difficult to build housing on the green belt. We've had permission because the whole purpose of the land sale is to improve the hospital facilities. It's commercial only to the extent that the best price gets you the best value for the hospital. And Harrow have restricted the proceeds so that, which we think is a good thing, so that the money from it can only be used for healthcare development on this site, which will lead to employment of Harrow residents on this site. So the NHS can't pick that up and say we're going to do something else with it, take it to another hospital, that money. So that's the first phase. So that's done. And of course, the NHS have given us a loan towards the new building, which is already going up, because they know that land sale is coming.
Right.
And all these land sales, you've got what's called a Section 106, where you've got to, in the middle of the whole project, you've got to do something for low-cost housing and staff housing, and we're doing that. Projected into the future is a big land sale on the eastern side, on the Brockley Hill side, which will particularly relate to staff accommodation, amongst other things. So what the whole project is doing with land sales west and east is to push the healthcare facilities together into the middle, which is really quite a good idea because they've been dispersed haphazardly since the 1920s without an overall integrated plan, which is good from the point of view that you've got a lot of land on the green belt for the patient under rehabilitation, but that was much more appropriate 30 or 40 years ago when you were rehabilitating trauma or tuberculosis patients or other infectious disease that had orthopedic consequences. Nowadays, the stays are much less. Yeah. And of course, nowadays, we've got the problem that since we take some of the most skeletally impaired people in the whole country, to find somewhere for them to park and get across the site to where they need to do is not that easy, because they want access on the flat, which we've got, but they don't want to have to travel a mile when they've parked the car. So this centralisation is going to be a good thing.
I was going to ask you about parking. That's the perennial challenge. I know there's been, since the new building is going up on the old car park, and there's a temporary car park built at the back.
Yes.
There was talk at one time of getting private funding in to build some kind of in-the-hill multi-storey. Is that still a possibility?
OK, so there's about 850 cars parked on the site every day, which is a lot. And those that come a few minutes after other people know how difficult that is. Obviously, unlike many of the central London hospitals, a significant number of those are staff cars because we know access is not that easy. There are some energetic souls that will walk or trot up the hill from the Stanmore station, but for many people, the car is the most viable form of transport. So 50% or so are staff cars. We want the patient parking. Because of two things. First of all, the level of disability of some patients and some of the really ludicrous suggestions of taking parts of the RNOH into town by UCH or by the Royal Free and getting people with sticks or one leg or chairs to go down the hill from Belsize Park or up the escalator from Warren Street are absolutely ludicrous when there's no parking on site. So for the patients, we need the parking because of disability. We also need the parking because our patients have the longest average, you think about where they come from around the country, the longest average individual journey of any hospital in the country. I think the return journey is about 152 miles or something, Rob. Yeah. I might be wrong, but I'll recheck it with Rob Hurd. So
we are a national hospital.
Yeah, so there are people coming from the south coast and all that kind of stuff. So with the new development, we are going to need space for about 1,000 cars. Now, of course, however difficult it is, nobody's paying anything. And there are very few hospitals left in the country where nobody's paying anything.
Yeah, people are amazed it's still free to park.
I don't want to get into that debate today. There's pros and cons of it. But I can tell you that a new multi-storey facility, which is certainly being planned, will cost somewhere between 8 or 9 and 14 million pounds.
Wow.
Now, probably all above ground, because those of you that know about building costs will know, if you go down 2 or 3 layers, every floor is 2 or 3 times the cost of doing it above the ground. So the NHS will certainly not fork out that money for that. You might get a donor for the children's ward or the intensive care, but there aren't many people that say, I'll give you 10 million quid for a multi-storey car park.
Difficult to sell.
Difficult to sell. So you would get to the point where it's got to be paid for. And there are companies that take it, design, planning, construct, and sort out the charging rates so that it pays for itself. I'm not talking about even any profit to the hospital. I'm talking about just paying to get it done. Well, the staff don't like it. I mean, I work also at another hospital where I certainly pay for car parking and just expect to pay for it. The staff don't like it because if they've stayed here, they've never had to do it.
Yeah.
And the patients don't like it because there'll be delays in clinics and it could overrun and it can run to a significant cost. And why are you ending up paying 10 or 12 quid for a day or whatever it is? So it is difficult, but I can tell you that it is likely that the only way to do it is on a system where people pay, staff and patients.
And that will be privately funded?
Well, it depends what you mean by privately funded. We will...
Well, it wouldn't be NHS money, and it's unlikely, as you say, that you'd get a donor.
Well, we will be repaying the developer on a tightly controlled contract. You know, any construction company is not a charity. They want to build it properly and make that whatever they make. They're 10%. So you've got to look at if it takes 20 years to pay for it, how much is it per year for 1,000 cars? How much has it got to be per day or half day?
Yeah.
That's all, just to make it work.
Yeah.
It's going to be a very hard sell because some people are very upset by it. And we don't want to disincentivize staff. We don't want staff to say, I'm not going to work at the RNOH because of these parking charges. It's the last thing we want. So it is tricky.
This is Brockley News. My name's Keith Reeve, and I'm speaking to Professor Tony Goldstone, Chairman of the RNOH. Is staff retention and even attracting staff to the RNOH more difficult here than other hospitals because of the location?
Probably on balance, yes. But like many of the hospitals further north in the country, it has a community feel, and there probably are more people that stay a longer time. So there are several reasons that attracting the staff is difficult. One is the access. It is not that easy. The Stanmore and Edgware stations aren't close enough. The bus travel is getting better, but it's not perfect. And it costs an enormous amount of money to put that bus travel on. You're outside London waiting for staff, just outside, although it feels to them just as expensive as London. And some of the things, you know, particularly with nurses and managers in training, in a much bigger hospital, they can plan to try and get promotion and train at 3 or 4 different levels by going to different departments in the hospital. Here, in many cases, because it's small, in order to get promotion, your good people might have to go somewhere else, and that also makes it difficult. So we've got about a 14% turnover of staff. If you look at it another way around, the average length of stay is 7 years then, that would be 100%. And the national target is about 12%, so we're a little bit above that. So considering the difficulties of access and the fact that there has been, till the bill, this kind of negative feel, will it stay, won't it stay, we do pretty well. And we have this enormous esprit de corps that when they are here, that people, you know, this expression going native, like me, I spent 30 years wondering why this place was here and then started fighting for it when I got here. So it's a balance. But now within that, there are certain staff grades which are very difficult to recruit. Everybody in London has difficulty recruiting theatre staff. They are very prized, they are very skilled, and it's stressful. So they know with almost every hospital wanting them, they can jump here and there. In fact, we're at the stage now where some of these people make themselves into a personal company and go out on agency for temporary employment, which is changing all the time. This makes it very difficult because the vacancy levels are higher in the theatres than elsewhere, and if you can't, doesn't matter what your surgeons can do or what your nurses can do, if you can't get the patients through the theatres quick enough, you can't get the work done. So, and some senior nurses levels, band 5 in particular, are difficult to recruit here. But these are national problems; they're not restricted to the RNOH.
How does this affect our budgets? Because I know the NHS is under incredible pressure financially, more than ever probably. I believe the RNOH is £2 million in deficit, which is probably no fault of the RNOH, it's just how budget squeeze is. You've mentioned increased throughput of patients in your time. Certainly there is a much greater level of activity at the RNOH than ever before. How are we faring compared to the past and similar specialist hospitals?
Well, for a long time, we stayed in the black until last year, but now, like about 80% of the hospitals in the country, we are in the red, but it's not explained properly to the public. And everybody who takes an interest in healthcare knows about the issues of how much of the national GNP we spend on healthcare, somewhere between 8 and 9%, which is, less than half what they do in the US and about 50% less than many of the advanced countries in Europe. It's difficult. We did have a problem of getting enough work through the theatres and the sessions full. That's all been addressed. We have a problem with waiting times, which is really the problem of too many people wanting to come here. We have a problem where, because we've got a small, the surgical workforce at consultant level is about 38. If you have some absence and some sickness and some retirement of 3 or 4 people, 3 or 4 of the top people, that's 10 or 12% of your workforce. You get an enormous impact from that. And you have a problem if that percentage is away. You have a problem for a variety of reasons. First of all, the people running the health service never really understood that your surgeons who are now 55 or 60 years of age get through complex work safely and quicker, much, much quicker than the people you appoint today. So if they're not there, first of all, there's a lag time to put someone else in. Secondly, when you put someone else in, they can't do the same work. Thirdly, when you're trying to catch up, you've got to pay the people that are there more money. Fourthly, which people never think about, these people that are disappearing were the people that did the private work for themselves, for the patients, and for you, so that your private wing is down. So you lose about 4 different income streams. But the most important thing is what we call the tariff, which means what you get paid for doing a procedure A or procedure B. So if you look at the complex work, so a lot of what goes on here is what's called revision, which means doing something on hips and knees which somebody else has done, which has gone wrong a few years later. Mm-hmm. Now, in simple terms, if you get paid something for doing a routine hip operation, and a revision, because of its difficulty, takes 3 times as long, it costs us 3 times as much, but we only get paid twice as much, something like that. Yeah. Now, if 60% of your work is all that, you're in financial trouble just because somebody says you get £3,000 for that instead of the £4,000 that it costs you. And we are fighting an enormous battle at a national level to get the complex work paid for properly. So until that is paid for properly, we look inefficient. The other thing I should say to you is we seem to accept in the healthcare industry that all you ever hear from the government is we, the providers, are at fault. We are inefficient, we're poor with our staff, we're this, that, and the other. In fact, in terms of what the Americans call the bang for your buck, what you actually pay for what you get, nobody's more efficient than we are. And we're trying to improve all the time. But you can't push the staff beyond a certain point because, A, they make mistakes, or we make mistakes. B, they don't like it and go. What always amazes me is how society expects every member of staff to be almost saintly for the modest pay that many of them have. They just try and do a decent job, They're not priests, they're not saints, most of them are not professors of surgery. They're trying to come in, do a decent job and go home. And for the money that they're getting, the system gets an enormous deal from them. So it's tough out there, or in here.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. Well, I can see it is, absolutely. Now, the RNOH has always been at the forefront of research and development. Kind of jewel in the crown is always the way I've termed it when I've spoken to people about it. What exciting projects have we got coming up? Because I know there's a lot going on, and sometimes our dear listener probably doesn't always hear about a lot of this.
Well, 2 or 3 things. I think these prostheses, those are the bits of metal you get stuck in your hip and knee. So some people do well and some people go wrong. And we've got a big project here with Professor Hart in the academic department, looking at what we call the material science. What's happening here? Why Why are some of these getting loose? Why are some of them coming out? We also know that tiny bits of metal, called the metal ions, are coming out of these things into your body and whizzing around the circulation, might affect your heart and your brain and all those things, and that some of these prosthetics will be better than others. So you really need a national programme to look at these things properly. Joe Bloggs shouldn't be testing a new one in Sunderland without a kind of national centre saying it's all right. That's what we're trying to do here.
Right.
The second thing is we need to work even closer with Aspire. We need to say today rehabilitation isn't only therapies. I mean, it's mostly therapies, you know, and all these things called exoskeleton. This bringing the electronics to moving people's limbs that don't move, to getting people along away from the traditional wheelchair, the so-called exoskeleton. We're into that with Aspire, and that needs to improve. And the third thing is we're planning to do a lot of work in the new kinds of imaging. Anybody that's had an MRI, it's a kind of awful noisy experience, takes a long time, so we need to shorten it, take the noise out of it. There are two new things we're hoping to do. One is that the MRI gives you a 3D picture of the muscles as well as the bones, so you can see which muscles you've got to work on to make the patient move better. And the other thing, which is very interesting, is anybody that's ever had an MRI knows that you lie down to have it. All musculoskeletal things relate to people standing up. So there's a whole lot of research that needs doing in converting what we call the horizontal MRI to the vertical MRI, and we're getting into that as well. So lots of different things.
Now, you recognised in the 2016 RNOH Staff Achievement Awards the roles of volunteers here at the RNOH, and there's been a big increase in that over the last couple of years. What value do you think RNOH volunteers bring to the hospital generally?
I think it's enormous, and I would like to see it even more of them, and them doing even more sophisticated things. Sometimes there are employment issues about stepping on the turf of people who are actually employed by the institution. But the volunteers, first of all, there's moving people around in a big campus where people can't get there and actually don't know where they're going.
Yep.
There's a supportive and educational issue for the long-stay patients, children and adults. And, you know, amongst our ex-patients and the kind of area in which we live, there's enormous expertise which will be given willingly if we both ask for it and also could find a way of not stepping on other people's toes. So the answer to your question is I think it's enormously changed in the last couple of years, thanks to Ellis and others, and I'd like to see much more of it. And interestingly, I think if you went to the population and the supporters in the right way, I think there's still an enormous untapped ethos of volunteering that we could take hold of and do better.
Our new hospital opens, I believe, the end of 2018.
Yes.
And that's going to take, I think you said, just over half, about 66% of our bed space, isn't it?
Well, it depends what use we put the top floor to, but something between 90 and 120 beds. We're currently running about 217. We keep the others open. People say, why didn't you do the whole thing? Well, the simple answer is they didn't give us the money to do the whole thing, and there's a technical reason why we could get the money we got without any more hassle, as opposed to going for another procedure that might have taken another 30 years to get the other half. So we've got to make this first half look successful and all the research with it and the private patient facility and the step-down facility. Then I think hopefully it will be easier to get the other 100 beds done.
Okay.
And then we might not close them all, and we might try and keep the hospital twice the size, but that's another bit of politics.
That's new news, is it? Okay. Finally, thank you, Tony, for your time. You're a Manchester City fan. Is Pep Guardiola the man for the job?
Well, we could talk for another hour about football. At least I could. Football is a metaphor for life. It's like other things that some people absolutely don't understand or hate, like the opera or the ballet. If you're into football, you're into football. And actually, you can deal with people, even though they're affiliated to another team. That's the kind of person you could do business with. So Manchester City is an interesting phenomenon. I'm a 60-year supporter, so I'm not a Johnny-come-lately since the money came in. Disappointing this season, I think he will get it right, but I think mistakes have been made. I think he's really been in control of transfers since before he came, so probably for the last 12 months, and they've not got those right, except maybe for one, we'll see. And the biggest mistake he made was trying to play his system with players who are not good enough. You can say that's the fault of having a load of players who are not good enough or are past their sell-by date, but actually you have to expect the manager to make an adaptation to that. So, no, not good enough yet, but possibly still. But as long as it's £500 million of somebody else's money and not mine.
They're working in the right direction.
Absolutely.
Tony Goldstone, CBE, Chairman of the RNOH, thank you very much for your time, and keep up the fantastic work you and the rest of the board here are doing.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure as always, and perhaps we'll do it again.
Please do, yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
I'd like to thank Tony for his time today at Radio Brockley, and thank you very much to my technical operator, Mr. Alan Joyce.
And if you do want to catch up with that and other previous interviews that we've done here on Brockley News, you can follow the links from our website. Go to radiobrockley.org and then follow the links to our YouTube site from there. And if there's anything else happening here in the hospital that you want to know more about, call us on extension 5483 and we will try and cover it on future editions of Brockley News and Brockley News Extra. Stay tuned to Radio Brockley across the week for more information about the events and services available in the hospital, along with the widest range of music you'll ever hear to suit all tastes. And of course you can catch Brockley News Extra on Monday nights and also Monday to Friday lunchtimes here at Radio Brockley. You can also tune into Brockley News every Sunday for half an hour just before bedside bingo. From me, Alan Joyce, goodbye.